never believed in miracles until I watched my own daughter die and come back with a message that will change everything you think you know about what's coming before the end of 2025. What Jesus revealed to her about surviving the events ahead will shake you to your core. But before I share this terrifying testimony, I need you to understand that what you're about to witness isn't just another story. It's a warning that could save your life. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I'm a nurse at Tampa General Hospital in Florida. For 12 years, I've worked in the pediatric intensive care unit, caring for children fighting for their lives. I thought I understood the fragile boundary between life and death in young patients. I was wrong. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened to my 12-year-old daughter, Sophia, on July 19th, just 3 weeks ago during Hurricane Debbie. That day started with the familiar routine of hurricane preparation. Sophia was helping me move patio furniture into the garage, her long dark hair whipping in the increasing wind. She was excited about missing school, but nervous about the storm. The weather service had downgraded Debbie from a major hurricane, so we felt relatively safe in our inland Tampa home. We'd weathered storms before. This one seemed manageable. By late afternoon, the rain was coming down in sheets unlike anything I'd seen. The storm surge was supposed to stay coastal, but something went wrong with the drainage systems. Water started rising in our neighborhood faster than anyone predicted. What should have been minor street flooding became a raging torrent within minutes. I was pulling Sophia toward our house when I heard the sound that still haunts my dreams, a deep rumbling like a freight train. I turned to see a wall of water, maybe 8 feet high, rushing down our street. It had broken through from the nearby creek, overwhelming every barrier in its path. I grabbed Sophia's hand and tried to run, but the water hit us like a concrete wall. The force was unimaginable. One moment I was holding my daughter's hand tightly, the next moment she was gone, ripped away from me by the current. I screamed her name as I was swept against a neighbor's fence, the water pinning me there as I watched helplessly. 2 minutes. That's how long it took the emergency responders who'd been staged nearby to find her. 2 minutes of my daughter being tumbled through debris-filled water, her small body battered against cars and trees. When they pulled her out, she wasn't moving. No pulse, no breathing, her lips already blue. I broke free from the fence and splashed through the receding water to where they'd laid her on higher ground. My nursing training kicked in automatically. I started CPR while the paramedics prepared their equipment, but I knew. After 12 years in pediatric intensive care, I knew what I was looking at. Sophia had been underwater too long, taken too much trauma. The odds of survival were essentially zero. The ambulance rushed us to Tampa General, to the same PICU where I'd worked for over a decade. My colleagues took over, running the same protocols I'd performed on hundreds of other children. The irony was devastating. Here I was, a woman who'd helped save countless young lives, watching the same procedures fail on the child who mattered most. They worked on Sophia for 38 minutes. 38 minutes of CPR, defibrillation, emergency medications, everything modern medicine could offer. The monitors showed nothing. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no signs of life whatsoever. Dr. Patricia Williams, the attending physician and my supervisor for 6 years, looked at me with eyes I'd seen her use with other parents countless times before. My husband Carlos arrived as they were preparing to call it. He collapsed beside me, and we held each other as our world shattered. The nurses, my own colleagues, gave us privacy to say goodbye to our little girl. I remember stroking Sophia's wet hair, still smelling like floodwater, whispering that Mommy was sorry she couldn't hold on tighter. But then something impossible happened. Something that defied every principle of pediatric medicine I'd studied and every case I'd witnessed in my career. At exactly 4:23 p.m., 43 minutes after her heart had stopped, the cardiac monitor began showing rhythm. Dr. Williams rushed back in, checking the leads, certain it was equipment malfunction. But Sophia's chest was rising and falling. Her pulse was strengthening. Her oxygen saturation was climbing. Within minutes, her eyes opened. She looked around the room, confused but alert, asking for water in a voice that sounded perfectly normal. The medical team was stunned. In 12 years of pediatric intensive care, I'd never seen anything like it. Near-drowning victims who are down for more than 4 minutes typically suffer severe brain damage, if they survive at all. Sophia had been clinically dead for nearly 44 minutes, with no circulation, no oxygen to her brain, no life signs whatsoever. Yet here she was, sitting up, showing no signs of neurological deficit. Dr. Williams pulled me aside. She was shaking. She told me that in 22 years of pediatric medicine, she'd never witnessed a recovery like this. The brain damage from prolonged hypoxia should have been catastrophic. By every medical standard we knew, what we were witnessing was medically impossible. But the real shock came when Sophia started talking about where she'd been. Her first words weren't about the water or the fear. They were about Jesus. My daughter, who'd been raised Catholic but never shown extraordinary interest in spiritual matters, began describing an encounter that would change everything we thought we knew about life, death, and what's coming. She told us she remembered the water hitting us, the sensation of being pulled under, and then suddenly finding herself in a place of incredible light. Not harsh light like hospital fluorescence, but warm, golden light that seemed alive. She said it felt like being wrapped in pure love, where every fear she'd ever had simply disappeared. That's when Jesus appeared to her. Not like the pictures in our church, but as a living presence more real than anything she'd ever experienced. Sophia described eyes that held both perfect gentleness and absolute power, a voice that spoke directly to her heart without making sound, a presence that radiated authority beyond human comprehension. But what Jesus showed her next would shatter our understanding of what's coming in the months ahead. Sophia spoke about visions of events beginning in late 2025, catastrophes and changes that would test every person on Earth. She described seeing time like a river, flowing towards specific events that would shake the foundations of everything people trusted. Jesus didn't just show her disasters. He revealed preparation strategies, spiritual warnings, and guidance about deceptions that would fool even dedicated believers. Sophia saw two types of people during these events: those who remained calm and protected, and those who were caught completely unprepared. The difference wasn't education, wealth, or even religious activity. It was something deeper. The medical staff couldn't explain what they were witnessing. Here was a girl who should have been brain dead, speaking with clarity and wisdom that seemed far beyond her 12 years. Nurses who'd worked with trauma patients for decades said they'd never heard anything like the coherence and detail of Sophia's account. Carlos and I listened in amazement as our daughter described not just the spiritual realm she'd visited, but specific instructions she'd been given about the coming months. Jesus had told her that time was running short, that events prophesied for generations were about to unfold, and that those who weren't spiritually prepared would face trials unlike anything in human history. But perhaps the most shocking part of Sophia's testimony was what Jesus revealed about children. He said that many young people would be given similar visions and warnings in the months ahead, that God was raising up a generation of youth to sound the alarm while there was still time to prepare. Sophia was just the beginning. The doctors kept her for observation for 4 days, running comprehensive tests, MRI scans, neurological evaluations, psychological assessments. Everything came back normal. Better than normal, actually. Sophia showed no signs of trauma, no brain damage, and no psychological distress from either the drowning or her near-death experience. If anything, she seemed more mature, more focused, carrying an urgency about sharing what she'd been shown. On the 4th day, as we prepared to take her home, Sophia took both Carlos's hand and mine. Her grip was firm, her eyes clear and determined. The machines around us beeped steadily, confirming what we could hardly believe. Our daughter was alive, healthy, and forever changed by an encounter that defied explanation. That's when she spoke the words that would launch us into a mission we never expected. looking directly into our eyes with a seriousness that seemed far older than her 12 years, Sophia said, "I have to tell you what Jesus showed me about what's coming." What she shared next about the specific events Jesus revealed for the remainder of 2025, the exact time frames when catastrophes would strike, and the survival strategies that could mean the difference between life and death, would keep us awake for days. But more than that, it would compel us to share this warning with anyone who would listen. Because according to what Jesus revealed to our daughter during those 43 minutes on the other side, time is running out faster than anyone realizes. The events that will reshape our world aren't coming someday in the distant future. They're coming within months, and most people are completely unprepared for what's ahead. Sophia's voice carried a weight that seemed impossible for someone her age when she began describing what Jesus had shown her. Each word was deliberate and urgent as our daughter started revealing the survival strategies for the events that would unfold before 2025 ended. "Mama, Papa," Sophia began, her eyes never leaving ours. "Jesus showed me a timeline, but it wasn't like any calendar I'd ever seen. The remaining months of this year glowed with different colors, and some pulsed like warning lights. He told me that the rest of 2025 would be when everything changes, not just for America, but for the whole world." I felt my throat tighten. As a pediatric nurse, I was used to focusing on immediate medical crises, life and death situations happening right now. But what Sophia was describing sounded like a series of catastrophes stretching across the remaining months of the year. Sophia continued, her voice growing stronger. "The first thing Jesus showed me was that most people won't see it coming. They'll be living their normal lives, going to school, planning Halloween and Christmas, worrying about everyday things. But underneath all that normalcy, something massive is building, like pressure before a dam breaks." She paused, looking out the hospital window toward Tampa Bay. Jesus said that the events of late 2025 wouldn't just be natural disasters or political problems. They'd be tests. Tests to separate those who truly know him from those who just think they do. The term sent chills down my spine. I'd been raised Catholic, attended Mass regularly, and considered myself a believer. But the way Sophia spoke about knowing Jesus versus thinking you know him made me question everything. "September was glowing bright red," Sophia continued. "Jesus showed me something happening to the power grid. Not just outages from storms, but something that would shut down electricity across multiple states for weeks. He said it would happen right when people least expect it, when they're focused on back-to-school activities." Carlos leaned forward. "Which areas, mija? Did he show you which areas?" He didn't give me exact names, but I saw shapes of the eastern United States going dark. Cities that never lose power would be without electricity for weeks. Jesus said that those who survive September would be the ones who learn to live without depending on technology instead of just having backup generators. The specificity was unsettling. This wasn't vague prophecy about distant tribulations. Sophia was describing events with the precision of someone who'd seen them happening. But what really disturbed me was the implication that even backup power wouldn't be sufficient. "October was different," Sophia went on. "That month pulsed orange like fire. Jesus showed me something happening to the money system. Not just banks closing, but all digital money disappearing. Credit cards, online banking, even cash machines would stop working within days. I thought about how dependent we'd become on electronic payments. If something disrupted those systems, our entire economic structure would collapse within hours." But Sophia was describing something even more comprehensive than system failure. "Jesus told me that the people who make it through wouldn't be the ones with the most money saved up," Sophia said, her voice taking on an almost otherworldly authority. "They'd be the ones who'd learned to trust him for their daily needs, the ones who'd practice generosity instead of accumulating wealth." This was getting into territory that challenged everything I thought I knew about financial security. My nursing salary provided well for our family, and we had savings accounts, retirement plans, college funds for Sophia. But she was talking about something that would make all of that irrelevant. "Jesus showed me families," Sophia continued. Some had bank accounts full of money and investment portfolios, everything you'd think they'd need. But when the test came, they panicked. They fought with neighbors over resources. They made decisions based on fear instead of faith, and it cost them everything. Carlos's voice was barely a whisper. What happened to them? They didn't physically die, Sophia replied, but something in them died. Jesus called it spiritual death while still breathing. They became so worried about saving their physical lives that they lost their souls in the process. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors. I was struggling to process what our daughter was telling us. It sounded paradoxical. How do you prepare for economic collapse without becoming consumed by financial fear? Then Jesus showed me the other families, Sophia said, and for the first time since she'd started talking, a smile crossed her face. These people had some money, but nothing excessive. What they had was different. They had peace. Even when everything around them was chaos, they stayed calm. They knew exactly what to do and when to do it. How? I asked. How did they know? Because they'd learned to recognize his voice before the crisis hit, Sophia explained. Jesus said that people who try to hear him for the first time during an emergency won't be able to distinguish his voice from all the panic in their heads. But those who'd been practicing, who'd been listening and obeying in small things, they'd recognize his voice immediately, even in chaos. This was hitting me personally. When had I last spent time actually listening for God's voice? Sure, I prayed before meals and during medical emergencies at work, but listening, actually sitting quietly and trying to discern divine guidance, I couldn't remember the last time. There's more, Sophia said, and her expression grew more serious. Jesus showed me that November would bring something no one expects. He called it the Great Shaking, but not like earthquakes. This would be when people's faith would be tested by events that seem to contradict everything they believe about God's goodness. What kind of events? I asked. Things that make people question if God really cares, Sophia replied. Tragedies that happen to good people, prayers that seem unanswered, churches that split apart. Jesus said that many people who consider themselves strong believers would walk away from faith completely. I thought about my own relationship with God. How would I respond if faced with circumstances that seemed to contradict everything I'd been taught about divine love and protection? Would my faith survive a real test? But the strangest part, Sophia continued, was what Jesus told me about December. He said that month would be when false hope appears. People offering solutions that sound like answers, but actually make everything worse. What kind of solution? Carlos asked. Leaders promising to fix everything if people just give up certain freedoms, Sophia replied. Economic plans that sound perfect, but require total dependence on government systems. Even religious movements that perform miracles but lead people away from Jesus. This was getting into territory that made me deeply uncomfortable. I'd always believed that miraculous events were signs of God's presence. But the idea that supernatural phenomena could be deceptive was a concept I'd never seriously considered. Jesus said the deception would be so convincing that if it were possible, even the elect would be fooled, Sophia continued. The only way to avoid it would be to know his true voice so well that you'd immediately recognize the counterfeits. The weight of what Sophia was telling us was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about surviving physical disasters or economic collapse. It was about a spiritual test that would reveal what people really believed when everything external was stripped away. But here's the most important thing, Sophia said, leaning forward with an intensity that made both Carlos and me hold our breath. Jesus told me that none of this has to be scary for people who truly know him. He said that for his real followers, the rest of 2025 would be the most exciting time of their lives. I wiped tears from my eyes. Sophia, this is so much to understand. How are we supposed to prepare for something like this? Our daughter smiled again, and in that moment, she looked both 12 and ancient at the same time. Jesus gave me specific instructions about that too, Mama. He said the preparation isn't what most people think. It's not about storing supplies or finding safe places. It's about learning to live by faith right now in our normal, everyday lives. What does that mean practically? Carlos asked. It means starting to listen for his voice in small decisions, Sophia replied. What to make for dinner, which way to drive to work, whether to help someone or mind your own business. Jesus said that people who learn to hear and obey his voice in ordinary situations will automatically know what to do when extraordinary situations happen. This was simultaneously the simplest and most challenging instruction I'd ever heard. Simple because it didn't require special knowledge or expensive preparations. Challenging because it required a level of spiritual sensitivity I wasn't sure I possessed. He also said something about community, Sophia continued. The people who make it through won't be isolated families trying to survive alone. They'll be connected to others who are also listening to his voice, but not just any church or religious group. Jesus was very specific about this. He said many churches and religious organizations would actually become part of the deception. How do we know which ones are real? I asked. By their fruit, Sophia replied immediately. Jesus said to look for communities where people actually love each other in practical ways, where there's real forgiveness, where people are willing to sacrifice for others. Not just talk about love, but demonstrate it consistently. I thought about our own parish. We attended regularly, contributed financially, participated in various activities, but did we really love each other in the way Sophia was describing? If crisis hit, would we actually take care of each other, or would we retreat into self-preservation mode? There's one more thing, Sophia said, and her voice carried a new note of urgency. Jesus told me that I'm not the only one he's speaking to this way. He said that all over the world, he's giving visions and warnings to people who will listen, especially children and teenagers. He called us the final warning generation. The phrase sent shivers through me. A generation of young people receiving supernatural warnings about coming catastrophe sounded like something from biblical prophecy, where God promised to pour out his spirit on sons and daughters who would prophesy. But Mama, Sophia continued, looking directly into my eyes, Jesus said that many adults who receive these warnings won't believe them. They'll explain them away as trauma, imagination, or religious fanaticism. He said that's why he's speaking to kids, because we're more willing to believe something impossible is possible. I felt convicted. How many times had I dismissed unusual spiritual experiences as psychological phenomena? How many warnings had I missed because they didn't fit my rational medical understanding of how the world works? So what do we do now, I asked. How do we live with this knowledge? Sophia reached for both our hands. Jesus said to start preparing our hearts immediately, not with fear, but with excitement. He said that for people who truly belong to him, the events of late 2025 would be like starring in the greatest adventure movie ever made, except they'd know how it ends. As I sat there holding my daughter's hand, feeling the steady pulse that had been absent for 43 minutes, I realized that our lives had just taken a turn into territory I'd never imagined. We were no longer just a normal family dealing with the aftermath of a hurricane accident. We'd become carriers of a message that could change everything for anyone willing to listen. But the question that haunted me as we prepared to leave the hospital was whether I had the courage to believe my own daughter, and whether I was ready to live as if everything she told us was absolutely true. The clock was ticking toward the most challenging months our world had ever faced. But for the first time since that terrible moment in the floodwater, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it can be hard to believe, but I hope it has touched your heart as it has touched mine. If this testimony has resonated with you, I humbly ask you to do 2 things that can make a difference. Please, leave a comment below and let us know where you are reading from. No matter where you are in the world, your country and your community are important. This way, we can unite our voices and pray together for protection and guidance for everyone. If you feel this message is important, please share it with at least 3 friends or family members. Sometimes, the deepest truths arrive in unexpected ways, and this could be the warning or the hope that someone desperately needs. Time is running out, and an act of sharing could truly make a difference.